Hello and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
I'm Jared.
I'm Steve.
I'm Chris.
I'm Dan.
And this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. Today is going to be the final discussion of Redshirts by John Scalzi. The short story for today is Prott by Margaret St. Clair. And Chris likes to swipe books across the screen even when we're doing audio-only recordings. We are going to be continuing our read of Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, the series, not the book. We did finish the book. With Children of Memory, we're going to be reading up to the end of part 3 for Children of Memory for next week's discussion. With that, we got to the end of Redshirts. I understood what the subtitle says. That says a story with 3 codas means, because I didn't, for once, read the end of the story. Steve almost got the ending he wanted, and Chris got a prediction right. What?
Did I?
I
Yes, you
got the
did.
prediction right.
Was that
think.
you or Chris? I thought it was Chris.
I think it was Dan. I get nothing right ever.
Oh no.
I had the
I was-
meta prediction.
Yeah.
I guess. Right.
Okay.
It's definitely Dan.
Okay.
You got my hopes up
Okay,
there.
okay.
I thought
But
I
one of
misremembered
you
something.
got it right. I
Yeah.
think, maybe I'm just, sorry, not a smart reader as you guys, but that was somewhere I never would have went. So I was really excited that you guys got up that prediction.
Well, I feel it was very. It was somewhat telegraphed because it was like the stuff the characters in the book were pointing out was exactly the stuff that was happening to them. So it was
That's
kind of
true.
they were suggesting the ending the whole time, kind of.
Yeah. So I guess it was either the way we read it, an extremely predictable book, or it is meant to be because it is just another story, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, it's how do I say? It's a fun ending. It's sort of it's sort of like a surprise ending, but it's not from complete left field, I guess. Right.
Hmm.
It still left me satisfied. I liked that ending. For me, it should have ended there, to be honest.
Hmm.
It should have ended where they all die, and then the next page you can have, no, I joke, they all survive. And then end it there.
And then end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Insane.
It didn't, the last 3 codas, it was like, I skimmed through them because they were kind of very boring to me. And it didn't need to be there, I think.
Really?
In
For
my
me, yeah. For me, it was the best part of the book.
Oh.
The 3 codas.
Why do you think that?
I think if he
Very
would
passive aggressive.
No, I'm just wondering, like what part was more interesting than the main book? Because me too, it was the opposite.
because the main book
Mhm.
it ends, and then if he says, he says the 2-line chapter 24, he says, "No, I'm just screwing with you. It's they lived happily ever after," and if it would have ended right there, I would not have enjoyed this book because it would have been just all just a really a joke, a side joke, and which is, I think that's what was Steve was complaining about the whole time when we were reading this book was that
he?
yeah, it's kind of the joke's funny, but it gets old, and I think if that book would have ended with chapter 24, the book would have been old. The joke would have been old, and it wouldn't have had the same resonance for me as putting those codas in and having those personal stories of the people in our time and how it affected their lives. That made it better for me.
A lot of people I've read, looked up some kind of reviews on it to see if anyone else felt the same way I did. It seems like a lot of people really like the codas, but I think I'm on Dan's side with. It kind of seems like he doubled down on the whole shtick. Like it's just more of it. Like he just digs deeper into the having fun with it, I guess. But why not just integrate that into the story? Why do we need? I don't know.
He definitely doubled down on the metafiction.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what Dan predicted, that he was going to do that, and and I don't know. I kind of like it.
Fair enough. Maybe one of the things is that because the whole, like I think 2 of the quotas or something are like half of it is like internet blog or
Mhm.
Yes,
text
yes,
or direct
yes.
messages, and they sort of struggle sometime when books try to adapt that into a book because it doesn't flow as well as if you're actually, reading it online. Maybe that's what I was struggling also with because I find myself struggling with that in other books too.
Mm. I really enjoyed the blog entry. One possible criticism I had of it was that the sense of humor was almost exactly the same as that of our characters. But in this case, it makes sense because this is the writer and those are characters that he created. So it would make sense that they have the same sense of
Yeah.
humor. I rather enjoyed the blog entries. That was my favorite coda. The other two, I think I got a bit bored by, but I enjoyed the story, and I did think that they added meaning to the book overall. I had a question for you, Steve. Like, do you think that the book would have been better without the codas? Like, in as much as you dislike it, do you think that what
It would have went from a 3.5 to a 4 for Steve.
I mean, if it ended with everyone died because they hit the asteroid, I think Steve would have enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I hate, I feel like such a Debbie Downer these last few weeks. I think the codas were a way for him to like play around and just kind of like cheat a little bit. I think just to kind of have fun with the characters, and I don't know. It kind of felt like cheating a little bit. Like, I don't know. I think, would it be better without the codas? I don't know. I'm about the same either way. I could do with or without them, I guess. I don't think it makes it any better, and I don't think it makes it any worse.
Mm.
But I just don't know why it's there, I guess.
I'm so conflicted about it because to me it's like 2 different books. The codas feel like he's things that he wants to say and points he wants to make, and the other one's a Star Trek story. If you know what I mean. And in theory, those 2 things should work because basically Star Trek episodes are supposed to be like mini moral tales the whole way through, so you should be able to put it together. But the 2 don't really fit together, and I think partly for the reason that you say, Dan, in that he varies his writing style to blog entries, to conversations, to script, all of that kind of stuff through it. And each of the codas I sort of liked in their own right. I even liked, by the end, the bit about the sun kind of waking up and going, why can I not remember anything? I hated at the start going, this is a kind of meta-ness that I don't need. But it then became about him wasting his life and him not actually making a decision and doing anything about it. It's like, I think those are things that Scalzi was trying to, the point he was trying to make. Like, you could have just died in a fucking car accident and have done nothing while you made your mind up and stuff. And I sort of like that by the end of it, but it doesn't really fit with what is a part comedy, a part kind of frivolous science fiction tale, which I actually, in its own right, I quite enjoyed the story of the Intrepid and the going back and forward. Like, it's very Scalzi in my, like, it's not overly serious. It's very enjoyable to read. It's very easy to read, and it's a good, as we've said before, a good kind of comparison to some of the more heavy stuff that we sometimes read. So it's like a really nice palate cleanser in that way. But these codas, as much as I enjoyed each of them individually, are like a different book. It's like somebody taking his initial novel and going, I'm going to riff on this as a separate offer, but with the same sense of humor, if that makes sense, to kind of give it a bit more. So I really don't know how I feel. I kind of suspect if I go forward 6 months and people say, what do you think about Redshirts? I'd be like, it was fine. It was, it's
absolutely.
not totally, think like Hugo Awards winning. I mean, there must have been a really weak year. Must have been, because I don't think there's anything particularly stand out about it, apart from it's sort of playing with the meta-ness for 100 pages or so.
The only thing I can think of on that, because I've been saying that from the start, why is this winning the Hugo Award? And the only thing I can think of it was because of the codas, because I think he was using that as kind of a commentary on writing in Hollywood
Yeah.
and a commentary on what people do with their lives, because he had, in a commentary on the advent of the internet's influence hitting people who do this for a living, and also the sons of people in Hollywood who have nothing better to do with their lives
The
than
Nepo Baby
the
syndrome.
party and speed around and whatever, and and the nepotism. Yeah, right. That's right. And so it was. I think it was that comedy that might have been attractive to voters of Hugo, where they would have said, okay, that's some pretty sharp and biting commentary, and we need to give that its due. So that's it's the only reason I can think why it was such, because that's supposed to be a prestigious award, and it's really the only thing I can think that people would have grasped on to elevate it in such a manner.
This is going to sound really. Oh, I'm sorry, Varsha. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I don't know enough about how the Hugo Awards are done, but I think it is a bit of an election system, right? Like people send in their votes. So it sort of makes sense. This book appears to have been popular. It may not necessarily always be the most profound book that wins. It might just be the one that most people have read or liked. That's not to discount all the other Hugo Award winners, but that I do think that has to factor into why something won the Hugo Award. Popularity has to be important.
Yeah. Isn't it vote of just the people that are there? I don't think you can send in your vote. It's like a bit weird, right?
No, you
No,
can.
I mean,
So
like,
you can be, if you went to Worldcon this year and bought, you basically buy a membership of that, and you get a vote. Then essentially in the Hugos.
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay.
It's not a panel of judges like I think the Booker has. I think it's
a popular vote.
It's a bit of a popular
so it's more
one,
of a popular. Right, that makes sense then. That makes sense.
Interestingly, I wonder if its ability to win has something to do with its ease of read and its length. Can you imagine, and if that's a popular vote, if something's 800 pages and an absolute masterpiece, the amount of people that will have read it actually is quite small. You could do Redshirts in a day and a half, like without too much issues, and be entertained thoroughly by it. In fact, I would suggest that is the best way to read this book, is actually in short term, straight up, because there's a lot of entertainment in it, and it is easy to read, and you'll never get bogged down. And if when you're trying to vote at the end of the year and you think about things that you enjoyed that were quite clever, that kind of have sort of an original kind of idea in them in terms of like approaching it that way, you'd be like, well, I've read Redshirts. That was sort of like in there. And whether it might, you were listing 5 books, I don't know what way the voting goes. It might be number 5 for everybody. And number 5 for everybody just might do enough and appear in enough lists for it to win.
Interesting.
It's also like difference between, like how do you define a good piece of literature, right? Like a movie. Like is the Marvel movie that everyone likes better than the Oscar, musical that the people at the Oscar like, or is it better than the, art film that all the art people and all the people really into cinema like? Which one is the best movie? It depends on the audience, right?
So I'm gonna have a really this is gonna sound really cynical, and I don't mean it to be. I mean it kind of as a compliment. It's gonna sound like a backhanded compliment. So we always say write for your audience, or whether it's YouTube or podcasting or writing or whatever it is, you want to find your audience and appeal to an audience, right?
Yeah.
I think it just so happened that this book is easy to read. It's funny, but the audience is probably people who vote in things like the Hugos. So when you have an audience who are fans of this kind of material, and they feel a connection to it, and they enjoyed it, I think that gives it a little bit of a boost. I think that probably helped him. And that's not a criticism. I just think it works out that way. But the other book I can think of that was a Hugo Award winner, I think it was one of the Dandelion Dynasty books. I can't remember if it was Way of Kings, but that book is like 800 or 900 pages too. So I do think the length, the material, and the kind of the pop culture that it appealed to.
I agree.
Probably helped with getting it, up the charts, which kudos for that. That's in no way to disparage the book. I just think that all those things work together to help it, in that way.
And again, popular vote contest, pop culture reference with Star Trek. You're on a winner there with people before you even start. And especially if you're sort of playing in that area.
Yeah, kind of gives you a head start. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of something actually, which would have made the book actually more interesting to me, like with the codas, is if he actually, instead of putting the codas there, if he recreated a website and then had a link or something and people would just go there and read on their own, because it would be like even more meta, right? It's something in the real world, referenced by the book, talking about people in the real world, about, you know what I mean? I think that would have been clever. Maybe it would have been annoying to set up.
Oh, that could have been very good, because you actually could have done audio recordings and stuff. You could have actually totally enveloped that. The interviews that he did with Denise Hogan as it was the other.
It would be
author.
more of a, how to say, like an art project sort of thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Which it still kind of is, but the meta commentary, right? But it would be, I don't know. I feel it would probably be more effective.
I mean,
Maybe?
I probably wouldn't go
I don't know.
clicking on those links. I'm glad to have read the codas, and I wouldn't have done the after work, honestly.
You'd have
I
been
barely
so
did
you'd have been so
forward.
annoyed.
Of the book.
Var should have been so annoyed that she read the last page and it wasn't actually the end of the book. That should have been like, I wasted all my time reading the first page, then the last page, and then all the pages in between.
Right? Yeah. I have to go to a website to get spoilers, which I'm not saying I don't do, but
Oh no, you'll be disappointed by the second apocalypse, man.
Yeah.
Wait, what? The end of the series is not in the book?
No, but a lot of the interpretation things, it's like people discussing it online. Like you're not gonna find everything in the books. There's a lot of stuff online that you don't understand from the books, probably.
Yeah.
That's fine. That I can live with. But like these three things aren't really interpretations of the book. They are they are added meaning to what just happened. I feel like it might be better to read this as for like a novella and 3 short stories rather than as like one book, because individually I liked all of them. I don't care about how they connect together. It's like I enjoyed reading the 300 pages that I did, and I did like the blog post, and I did like the, in my opinion, somewhat cutesy message of like, live life to the fullest while you have the chance.
But the way it's put there implies that you should read all of them because that's the book, right?
Yes, that's the book. That's the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to not have to do. Like your suggestion makes sense, having like separate novellas or something like that, or short stories probably somewhere else. Because if you're into, you can read that. If you're not, you can just read it as is. Because it doesn't feel like it adds to the book, like I think a couple of people said.
Yeah,
the way that I need.
What I might have encouraged, though, if it had done that, is almost like this fan fiction element of other people doing their own versions of the blog posts and the background stories and all the rest of it. And actually, you would have created something, I think, quite extraordinary in some ways by having this kernel of an idea that riffs on something a lot of people already know, and start basically doing, here's two codas, but they're really 2 examples of investigations into the implications or what happened to the real people. I think people could have done that for many of the characters within the story. One bit I thought I liked when I read it the first second, then about 5 seconds later I was like, oh no, I hate it, is when Margaret meets the writer at the end. I was like, oh, this is too much. This honestly, just give it up.
Yeah, that's why I went from good message to cutesy message.
Yeah.
That's the point at which I switched my mind about that.
Well, then don't go to the supermarket and read romance books, Chris. I'm just telling you right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, funny enough, Jared, I was thinking exactly the same point of this. This is pretty much turned into every staple of romance literature that's in the supermarkets at the time. It's sort of cheapened it a little bit, even though it cheapens itself the whole way through because it mocks itself the whole way through the
Mm.
story in terms of against the TV series and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you didn't have that in there, it wouldn't be as kitsy as the Star Trek episodes it was making fun of in the first place. You know, so it's it kind of fits with it.
And I think one way to think about, like, maybe not the short story one, but the other way to think about why they fit together as a whole is that these guys, they went back in time. Yeah, I guess it was time travel. Went back in time,
Yeah.
talked to a bunch of people, and left. So we are sort of looking at the fallout from that with
Yeah.
these characters, right? So I guess in that sense, it makes sense to think of it as like one unit as well. Like, it's, yeah, I don't know enough about like structuring your novel and what works and what doesn't to comment on it, but I guess there are ways to look at this that
Yeah.
might tie it up together neatly-ish.
Usually in sci-fi, you end like with a peak, sort of, right? You end with a plot twist. You end with, that's very common. You end, you don't. There's not a climax, and then it goes back down. I guess maybe in space operas, I haven't read much of it, but in this case, I guess the climax or whatever would be the final plot twist, right? Because then but then it goes down again, which again feels
Mm.
weird because the whole epilogue is like, I don't want to say lower level, but it's not. It's extending. It's not going up, climaxing the story. I guess. I don't know if it makes any sense.
No, I think it does. So now I'm wondering why it's called coda. Like, I don't. Is it
True.
a music thing or is it a poetry thing?
It means tale in Italian.
Tale. Oh, and I thought it's like
I assume it's a thing in something.
Yeah.
it's a
Well, coda's
poetry or
musical.
Music. Okay.
Yeah.
What's that? Sorry, Chris.
So it's a musical device. So basically, when you have I can basically put it in popular music terms. So most popular music songs have like an introduction, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? And essentially, a coda at the end would be something that riffs on the original theme, but as its own thing. It doesn't actually have the same chord structure, melody of the main piece itself. So it kind of riffs in its own right.
Well,
and when you put it in that
yeah.
context, that is what happens here.
Yeah, a little change in time signature or something.
Yeah, and its style in this case. So
Its
it
style,
does
yeah.
make thematic sense, there's no doubt.
I thought
Yeah,
it was
so-
pretty clever that
Mhm.
the girl taking the pictures of the to get proof because it was gonna be fading away or whatever. I don't know. I liked it. I liked the codas. I think they were
Yeah, how does that work
entertaining.
though? Taking a picture, because in the rules are like that when something cannot coexist in the world because it's not supposed to be there. But then you take a picture, but then the thing in the picture is also not supposed to be there. I don't know. By the same logic, in theory, the thing in the picture that's not supposed to be there should also disappear, I guess.
It's like
But the-
Snapchat.
But the other part of the logic is it goes as far as the writer has thought of it.
That's true.
Yes, exactly.
So the writer has only thought as far as the objects themselves. He hasn't thought of the pictures or he hasn't stated the rules. So you can make up your own.
Yeah. One of the things that made me think of actually that episode with her was very much I think he's talking about people's attachment to characters or to things that aren't necessarily tangible or real. Does people's relationship with fiction or with characters or other people, a lot of people will dismiss it, but basically I think what he was pointing out is that was actually a reality even in a fictional context for somebody, and it doesn't dismiss its value or its people's attachment to it, regardless of whether it happened to them or could have happened to them or something like that. Which is why the end sort of rankles me a little bit, because it blurs the line between fiction and reality that little bit, and maybe that's his last final in joke to a certain point of view. But I also feel that people that are appreciating this book are Star Trek watchers, science fiction fans, not necessarily going to get the humor of a romance subplot coming to its natural conclusion.
Yeah. One of the best parts I liked of those codas were the part with the people he killed, the extras he killed, talking to him in the dream, saying,
Yes,
we don't
like
mind
that.
dying, but it's more like we don't want to die for a shitty subplot that makes no sense. Just make our deaths more interesting to the plot or more worthwhile, right? It's like a comment on all those shitty sci-fi movies that don't,
Yeah. I'm
make
gonna
it worth
die.
it, I
Yeah,
guess.
they said it's bad writing, and he said it's not bad writing. Ice sharks? Really? Is that where we are? I was killed by ice sharks, and that's not bad writing? You couldn't have done better than that? Okay. Lie to yourself.
And we met Davis again. I thought we'd never see him again after he got eaten by those Herbert Estate offending landworms.
Well, it was the one. Do you remember how you died? Just the exploding head, and what makes it worse, it wasn't even my exploding head. I didn't even get the cool death. I just was standing beside the guy's head exploded.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I love how the when they're coming into the ship and Kerensky's flying, and he's like, he's doing all these sudden wild maneuvers and flipping over the ship and all that, and he's like, how is he doing this? Oh yeah, he's gripped by the narrative. I'm just like, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That made me crack up. I was laughing.
But again, the reality of everybody in the thing, even though it's a narrative and they knew it was probably going to keep them safe, they were like, I'm never getting in a shuttle with you again.
Yep. I'm gripped by the narrative. I'm going to use that as an excuse next time I do something dumb at work. I was gripped by the narrative.
If I'm pissing down the back of the radiator drunk, you'll go, I was gripped by the narrative.
Yeah.
I had to do it.
Oh, shit.
We haven't talked too much yet of the meta ending with Hansen and the conversation between Hansen and Dahl.
Yeah.
I did predict that bit, though. I just predicted it for the wrong person.
Yeah.
Because that Dahl is the protagonist, Senator, who was supposed to see the guys through, but it was obviously the other guy. Yeah, something half right.
That's the part I thought. That's the part I said Chris had predicted.
Oh, okay.
What was it that Dan
I
had
predicted
last
that
time?
the extras were actually the characters on another story, which was the story of the book, and that's why the narrative of the extras was the same as the narrative of the meta show inside.
Got it. And what was it that Chris said?
So I was saying that the reason that Dahl couldn't die is because he was actually, even though he thought of himself as an extra, as a red shirt, he was actually the protagonist of this story.
Right. So that's the part that I said.
Well, technically, our prediction was both the same. To be honest, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, both together.
Yeah.
My introduction was.
See, Boss is always right, guys. You got to remember this. She's the boss.
I'm still not sure, but go ahead.
Anyway, if I had the patience, I would go back and look at it. If I was a good boss, I would go listen and then give credit the right way. But I'm not. I barely like being a boss. So.
I was going to say, if I was a good boss, accepting that she is the boss and that she has control over my life, and therefore will not think too much about it and just accept it as a given. That's nice.
Yeah, you made a good point, Chris, about the the commentary on seeing actors as, you know, their fantasy element in somebody's life, but people treat them and how they interact with these fictional characters on the screen, and that was it was really, I thought that was really well done when the sisters were talking, and you know, the one sister's trying to tell her she's mopey, and you know, and she's saying it sounds like watching these people happy at home on these home videos. You know, you're just modeling about them having a happier life than you, and then she, of course, says, "Well, no, because she's dead." You know, and that's kind of like that commentary you were talking about. It's like, don't assume that somebody's life is great just because you see them on a screen in a story they're just fictional, you know. And I think that's part of his theme in dealing with that aspect there. So I thought that was pretty well done. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the coders because I think the coders you can take little stuff like that out of them, and he has kind of a bigger point in what he's trying to write for the whole novel.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take from there about in terms of like treating your characters with respect if you're a writer, and in terms of what you take away from stories as well, with the codas, right? Like you just watch life happening to other people in a story or otherwise, and what you do with that for yourself. I think we saw different characters go through that in the codas, and I really appreciated it. Like it was a very sweet, hallmarky message, but I enjoy that sometimes. So
Yeah.
I think he was also basically saying if you give characters a good enough backstory with enough kind of nuance in it, like the relationship with Jenkins, like them writing the letter where it basically says, "While you're not my wife, your existence made my life complete in a certain way." It is this idea that rather than her dying with ice sharks and that being the end of it, you can write better. You can create narrative, the things that connect you. So he created a melancholic moment in the story, even though it was an extra who you could barely remember her role or who she worked with or anything like that just at the time, because he filled it out, if you know what I mean, and give it some gravitas and give it some meaning for people. And in our story, the extra then could look back at this alternative version of herself and kind of go, that could have been a life that could have led. And kind of do wish fulfillment through there, and also accept the fact Butch is dead. So,
and I think there was something about that character. I forget her name. Was it Miriam?
Margaret.
No, Margaret. Oh god, I'm reading too many books at the same time. But so
No.
Margaret, when she like she doesn't even realize that she's unhappy or that she's just sort of coasting in her life until she sees this woman whom she played having a full-fledged life, and I think the state of melancholy that puts her in, at which point her sister calls her Moby, I think that was pretty deep, that bit.
Yeah, Eleanor, that's who it was.
Eleanor, okay.
Or Eleanor's sister, yeah.
But no, her sister's Samantha. Samantha is Samantha and Eleanor. I think Margaret was the actual
character
wife. Yeah.
Oh, she was the wife. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought Samantha was the friend. Anyway, there you go. I thought she was the friend of Matthew. You know, the person that he didn't. He basically said, I couldn't have forgotten to do that, because the first thing I would have done would have been message you or sent you a DM, and I didn't do that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, names not important in this part of the story. I probably mashed them all together. Not because I did read it all in one go.
Yeah.
So Hansen and Dahl, I don't think I got that really. Like I sort of appreciated and enjoyed the meta aspect of it, the implied meta aspect of it, but that was it. That was just like he's just there to sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Is Hansen supposed to be Scalzi in this book? Sort of the writer writing himself into the story to tell Dahl why he was important.
I don't know if that's okay. Maybe it's, sometimes in the book you need someone to tell the protagonist something. Or to tell the protagonist what he already knows or something, but do it in public so that also the viewers and the readers can see or whatever. You know what I mean? So you can have a discussion instead of internal monologue, which can sometimes be boring.
So he's the friend who tells the protagonist, "You're in love with that person." Like that's how they all find out that they are in love.
I thought that was something like that. I thought.
Yeah, maybe that makes sense.
Yeah,
the richest guy in the universe.
And I also liked, the fact that they say, "Oh, when the narrative finishes, what happens to us?" It's kind of like, when the book finishes, I guess, what happens to them, right? Do they just exist within the book? I guess in this sort of, weird alternate reality, they maybe would continue, or maybe it would just disappear. Who knows? That's a interesting thought. Because that's how we, all these people we read about, they just, The existence of that concept exists as long as you or someone is reading the book, and then there's nothing else outside, in a sense. Apart from all the other meta stuff that in the codas, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. When I was a kid, I used to watch movies, and I would hate it where they ended. I'm like, this, we're just getting to the good part. I want to see what happens afterwards. So I guess it's a bit like that.
Yeah. It did remind me of a story of it was something like all the characters from books went to Mars because books were banned from Earth, and then someone kept like one copy of each book, and that's how they survived. And when the last copy goes away, there was more to the story, but when the last copy goes away, they just die forever.
Right.
It's kind of like the same riff as, there's like the saying, like you die 2 times, once when you die and once when the last person thinks of you or something like that,
Remembers
right?
it.
It's a bit like that, but
Yeah.
with concepts.
What's that movie that's based on an animated film?
There's a lot of movies based on animated.
No, the like with that, you die when you disappear forever, when people forget you. It's not an Encanto. It was the other one. I'll find it.
Yes. I don't know.
Yeah, but I like that. Yeah, so either they all died when the show ended, or they lived happily ever after, whichever. Pick your ending.
Again, I think that was a bit of a funny play, is that whether they all die at the end or he's just kidding at the end, it sort of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The story's over at that stage. Like, who cares at that stage? Like, if Steve hadn't read chapter 24, he'd have got the ending that he wanted. And if you read it at chapter 24, then you'd like everybody to live. It's fine. You can have whatever ending you want. But I think ultimately the whole point was, we're looking for better writing.
Yeah.
Who cares if people live or die?
Your characters deserve better. Your audience deserves better. You deserve better.
Better, yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed reading the book. Like I'm with everybody else. Like it didn't make my list of favorites, but I had fun with it.
Yeah.
And we all need a book like that.
I would give it like an 8 out of 10 for me. I really enjoyed it. If I had to read it, I would have probably preferred just not to read the 3 codas immediately after. Maybe read it like a week after or something, and read the rest in 2 days. I think that would have been a lot more enjoyable. Just read everything in one go, sort of thing, 2 or 3 days. But I think it was pretty good. I liked it.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Maybe some books aren't conducive to this discussion.
Yeah, I just would find it impossible to rate, because I sort of don't even. I haven't really put the book together as a whole myself, a bit like I said. So it's just kind of, I enjoy it. Yeah, glad I read it.
Yeah. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads.
And I do quite like Scalzi's kind of easygoing reading, kind of recognizable kind of themes that he writes about. It's always sort of, it's his own world, but it's sort of based on somebody else's world, so to speak, a lot of the time. Like, a lot of his fiction seems to be like that. And that, it means you're never lost too much. It's not like reading some other books. Like, if you compare it to something like Embassy Town, which is like, you need to get about 150 pages in before you have even the faintest idea what is going on in that. There's a perseverance element to that. And then it pays off. Well, it pays off for you, or it doesn't at the end. But this one, you're never lost from page 1 as to kind of the world it's set in, or kind of the rules of the universe or anything like that. So, very recognizable.
Immediately the land sharks come and get you. Not landworms.
Landworms or ice sharks.
And ice sharks. that movie I was thinking of is Coco. I like that.
Oh yes, Coco. Yeah.
Anyway, was there any other Redshirts topics? We talked about the codas. Was there anything like specific in the codas that was worth discussing?
Yeah,
been through all
we
the
covered a few things.
Yeah.
I think like Chris said earlier, that this is a book that 8 months from now I'm probably gonna kind of forget about. But I enjoyed reading it when I did, and it was nice to have it in between kind of, the Wars of Light and Shadow and
Yes.
Malazan Book of the Fallens and the the heavier stuff that but probably like
1984.
1984 and
Yeah.
Rediscovery
probably,
of Man. Yeah,
probably for you guys the the Baker series and so it was just a nice light read in between all that other stuff. And it's like, but I won't, like Vasha said, it's not going to be on my top 5-10 list for the year or whatever, but it was nice. It was, it was fun.
Yeah. It would be a nice book to
Yeah.
own if I owned any books. Just have and then, lend it to someone if they need something to read for a bit or bring on vacation, right? It's like one of those, like, you
That's a
need a
good
bit of
shout.
light read amidst the heavy stuff, I guess.
A sci-fi beach read. That
Yeah.
is Redshirts.
Nice.
I think if somebody's in a reading slump of some sort, this might be something that will,
It's a good point.
get them out of it maybe, because it's nice and light and it's funny and it's so it might be something definitely good for that.
Question is, does it make any of the three people that don't watch Star Trek want to watch any Star Trek?
A little
No.
bit. So I got the sense from this book, actually, not because I'm barely exposed to any Star Trek information. I think Dan goes looking for Star Trek videos, but or at least they show up on his feed and he watches them.
No, I
but
watch.
I haven't seen.
I don't know if you guys watch Red Letter Media. They talk about Star Trek all the time.
Okay.
Sometimes.
So anyway, like, I have no information. So whatever information I got from this book, I feel like it's probably a lot of garbage science, but even that has some interesting jumping off points, right? Like that's the stuff I like in sci-fi. Like I don't expect that the science will be accurate, and like I don't know enough to, in most cases, to judge whether or not it's accurate. But the idea that it's jumping off from, I think that's what usually fascinates me about sci-fi stories. And it sounds from this book that there were probably a lot of interesting jumping off points that were used in the series. But I'm not sure if that's worth the amount of time that I might have to spend watching this show.
Oh no, I'm gonna have to do this episode by episode watch along series all by myself.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll watch it with you, Chris.
Isn't that what Star Trek is about? Like, like some sort of science thing, and there's a moral lesson for every show, kind of, right?
They're moral tales.
Yeah.
They are. And because
Oh.
science fiction offers you the possibilities to kind of take it in any different direction, you can kind of play with that morality a lot and kind of reset the world for the next episode, because that was just what happened on that planet.
Yeah.
That was their rules, and that's the code that they live by.
It's kind of like a thought experiment, right? Like when you think of, what if
Right.
society was like this? Then what would be the morals? What would be the right thing to do, right? And then you can explore it through science fiction, because then you could have a society like that. Fiction, right?
And probably unsurprisingly, every now and again, there is just an absolute cracker of an episode that is just like, okay, that actually twisted my brain and made me think of that. Like if you're writing hundreds of episodes of anything and you've got good writers on them, you will hit on a couple that are really standout.
Yeah, there were occasional ones that were like pretty good. Either very good social commentary for the time it was being played, or there are a couple here and there where somebody gave it their best when the writing department and just really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's popcorn TV.
I started to play it in the background while I was working, but I sometimes listen to audiobooks or play TV shows in the background while I work. But I feel like it needed more attention than I was able to give. But I don't like it enough to, or at least what I watched, didn't make me want to give it my full attention of TV viewing time. So.
Well, you got to pay full attention every time Captain Kirk gives a speech.
Yeah.
It's riveting.
Yes.
Because I
We
think
traveled to
that-
space and time.
Look at
Is that how he
Humanity.
talks?
the top 10 episodes and watch the top 10 episodes, maybe.
That sounds like a good plan. Maybe we can do like a watch along, and you guys can talk me through all the stuff that I don't know.
No, that's why you need to watch it from the start. Every episode in
I
these
think
sketches.
Malazan is a commitment. Imagine watching Star Wars from the beginning
Star Trek, yeah.
or Star Trek.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There was even
Anyway.
that joke within the books, wasn't there? When somebody said Star Wars and he went, no, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
There was Wait, you guys didn't mention the moral of the story thing and earlier. I think the codas are that's what the codas are, right? The moral of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even little sections in the main story too. There was different little sections that had their own little moral going on. When Dahl would come to a realization about his perception of the guy in the tunnels there. What was his name?
Jenkins.
Jenkins, yeah. He would have this little, what do you call that? Realization. When you realize that your perception of somebody was wrong, and not a coda. What do you call that? Epiphany. There you go.
Mm.
All right.
I just usually don't like the moral of the story to be explained to me. Because it feels, if I think about it myself, it feels more convincing to me than if someone tells it to me. Right? So when they actually go through the length of telling me, it's like, okay, I know how it is. You don't need to. I don't know. I think for me it detracts a bit from the experience, but that's just a personal thing.
No, that makes sense. But I think in this case, like again, structurally, if assuming that it's following the episode structure, it's got the episode and like I don't know what the moral of the story thing looks like in an episode, but this sort of fits, I guess, in the parody aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think there are some books that I like more simply because the message is like be kinder or nicer to each other. I think Jared likes that too. But
be good to each other.
Yeah, be good to each other. Like not maybe I don't know your opinion on books that do that, but I know Jared says that a lot. But I like that. I like some authors because they tend to feature kind characters, and it's not that I don't like the other kind of books, but I tend to like these more or appreciate them sometimes. I read them when I need them and they're nice. So this is a book like that, I guess.
Yeah.
Versus Team Jarrett. Jarrett, I should have said. That's right. Kind. Ginger characters.
Oh, I had one more question about the humor in the book. Like we were just talking earlier about like maybe keeping the book around, and I don't know if you mentioned rereading it, but there are some authors whose humor I love a lot, whose jokes work on multiple levels, and when I reread them, I notice things that I didn't notice before. So the book stays as funny on multiple rereads. Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams, Woodhouse. That's my comedy. What's the word I'm looking for? The three gods.
Oh, yeah. You're Mount Rushmore.
Trinity.
Trinity.
Comedy
yes.
Trinity. Yeah,
that's my comedy Trinity. So do you guys think, like, what do you think about the rereadability of the comedy in this book?
That's a good question.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here.
That's my job.
That's Steve's job. I don't think it would be as funny the second time around, to be honest with you.
I can't imagine rereading it. I think that's my. I can maybe see in like 10, 15 years, kind of going, having made my way through more Scalzi. I can see myself picking up Scalzi in general. I'm thinking, right, I know what I'm going to get because it is sort of like easy read and that kind of stuff. And maybe Redshirts is part of that kind of. Oh, may as well kind of do that. It certainly wouldn't be something that I read. A bit like about 1984, where you kind of go, I could see myself reading that every couple of years, or like a Forever War or a Dean's Dream, that kind of stuff. Where I think every time I read that, I'll get something new out of it. I doubt I'll get anything new out of it. I don't think a reread will kind of fill my mind with new thoughts. I'd be surprised if that happened, but of course you never know. That's the point of rereading.
I think I would like Scalzi telling different jokes. But I don't think I would reread this book for those jokes,
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I like a sense of humor.
Yeah. And I think some of the get something new out of it bit is reduced because what we talked about with the model of the story being laid out explicitly in the 3 codas. That might reduce the rereadability, I suppose, maybe. But I can see this being a nice comfort read, maybe not to enjoy the jokes more, but just sort of not for myself, like as a comfort read period. But yeah.
I also found that written comedy is not like if you see movie comedy, it relies a lot on you set up a joke and then you repeat it throughout. And it's always funny. Or sometimes it's not always funny, but it's a funny joke that resonates with you, then you like it every time, right? And then when you rewatch it, you're like, oh yeah, I enjoy this. But if it's written comedy, for some reason it feels different. Like you don't if you reread it another time, it doesn't feel. If it's new in a new setting, then yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, it's the joke I like. But if it's the same exact joke in the same setting, it doesn't hit as hard. I don't know why.
Fallbacks, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I would reread it. I would read other things from him though, and I would probably recommend it to other people in the right circumstances.
Yeah. It is. I think it's the type of book I could recommend easily to a non-sci-fi reader as something that's sort of enjoyable and whimsical. It mightn't be my first choice because of its meta-ness, for sure, with the codas, and that's maybe a case where if the codas didn't exist, it would change my ability to recommend to people. But I think in general, Scalzi is a good place for a lot of people to start. From what I've read of even his other stuff, no, it's quite approachable and it's entertaining for sure.
Yeah, I would like to read more Scalzi. I think Old Man's War has been on my list for a while, but I would like to definitely read more Scalzi. Yeah, I his sense of humor appeals to me. Like if his if his other books are similar, I think it's got a bit of a Andy Weir quality to them too, right?
I don't know what you're saying. Yeah.
Or I don't know if I'm just making that connection because I listened to The Martian by in the audiobook, which was also narrated by Will Wheaton. But I think so the delivery of the jokes would be similar, right?
Yeah.
But it did remind me of Andy Weir regardless. So anyway.
I find it ironic that you're listening to sci-fi books narrated by Will Wheaton, a major character on a Star Trek show that you've never seen.
Helmut Head himself. Yep.
Yes. I at least know. Okay, I don't know what character Will Wheaton played in Star Trek. I just know that he was in Star Trek, and the reason I know that is because I was a big fan of The Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory. Yeah,
oh, that's right, of course, yeah. I was going to say, it's either that or Stand By Me, but he's a lot younger than that, obviously.
Yeah. I think if it wasn't for that show, I probably wouldn't even know that Star Wars and Star Trek existed as shows. Except maybe that one time that...
Welcome to our host of a sci-fi speculative fiction podcasts. That if it wasn't for the Big Bang Theory, you wouldn't know about Star Wars or Star Trek.
You wouldn't know the two biggest pillars of popular science fiction.
I'm trying to think when I first heard of them, and I think it was on that show.
Yeah.
I genuinely think that it was on that show.
I'm just trying to think. Is there anything more famous than Star Wars and Star Trek in sci-fi? Is there?
No.
I think so. It boggles my mind.
So,
Big Bang Theory, apparently.
Will you accept my excuse if I say I only started reading sci-fi like 2 or 3 years ago? As in like sci-fi, picking things specifically from the sci-fi genre, not
excuse.
Not like, I used to read some sci-fi, but like not almost exclusively sci-fi and fantasy. So yeah, I already heard the no's, but I won't shut up until you say yes. I will accept the excuse.
I still know of the existence of Twilight and 30 Shades of Grey, whatever, 50 Shades of Grey, even though I don't read romance or stuff, fanfics, I guess.
Smut.
But yeah,
But they came out while you were alive and growing up. Like I don't know, didn't these
Sure,
shows
a lot
come
of
out?
Star Trek and Star Wars came out when you were alive. Pretty sure.
No, but like when they were like super popular. Okay, so we have to count time from when I moved to the US because I didn't hear anything of it growing up in India. I don't
Okay.
think people in India didn't hear, but I think I didn't hear
you
of
didn't
it where
hear
I
of it.
grew up. So in the last 10 years, I don't know if it had as much buzz as.
I'm gonna say that since Marvel brought Star Wars, it's been way more merchandise. It's been way more out there,
That is
and
true.
probably it's more popular now than it's ever been, at least with the audience at large. I would think, because it went kind of, it was very popular, and then it kind of went down, right? And then it sort of went up again with the first 3 episodes, but then went down again. So
I don't think I'm stepping out of line by basically saying Star Wars was a white dude of a certain demographic and a certain genre of time. Is it before the Disneyfication of it? It was very much the center of that culture, if you know what I mean. And it's become something else now. I think it's sort of not for me anymore in a lot of ways, even though I've read a lot of the books and all of that kind of stuff and really enjoy that universe, obviously. But I can see how being outside that demographic would mean that it maybe did pass you by. Like, I can see that.
it's kind of like saying you don't know what Marvel is, kind of. In these, you know what I mean? It's like it's kind of
And
everywhere.
honestly-
Even if you
And
don't
here we
want it.
go. Here we go. You ready? You ready?
I kind of say.
until about 7 years ago, no friggin' clue.
There
you go.
Fair enough.
And that was because my friend who I think is a fan of Star Wars, don't know about Star Trek, he used to drag me to superhero movies in the IMAX that I lived nearby. But I went reluctantly. I became a fan of some superhero movies, but I used to think that I don't like superhero movies before. And I only went because it was IMAX.
Yeah.
And he
good
made
excuse
me
from my
go.
view.
So,
I mean, I'm not a fan
So,
of
yes.
superhero
Well,
movies. I'm just
so-
saying that
So
they're everywhere. Even if I don't watch
but like
them.
I didn't. But I wouldn't have known about
Okay.
like Marvel and
I see.
DC. I don't think I knew about them until I saw those movies. So, in conclusion, I live under a rock with a tiny hole the size of Big Bang Theory.
That's interesting, though, seeing how different
Yeah.
demographics are not exposed to the same culture, I guess, as we are, I guess. Because it's kind of, we
Mhm.
assume certain things are ubiquitous because everyone knows them in, I don't know, Western society, but I guess they're not really outside of our very big bubble, in a sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, other than the person who used to make me watch superhero movies, who else
he
used to
keeps saying
watch?
that. It's like, oh, now we know how Vasha learned how to make other people read what she wants to read.
She had a sensei.
Yeah.
She was the Padawan, if you excuse the
Yeah, the Star Wars reference.
You
Yeah.
had a Yoda who taught you how to use the ways of the Force to get people to do what you want. This was interesting.
He
Yeah,
also
yeah.
made me watch a few of the Star Wars movies. Could not get into them. I fell asleep during half of them. He got mad.
It happens.
It happens.
Maybe he started with episode 1. That's the problem.
Yes.
That would have put me to sleep.
Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, are we ready to talk about Prott?
Yeah. Okay.
And,
I'm ready to leave then.
right.
I don't want to
See
hear
you, Dan.
anything
See you
about
next-
this story. Please don't offend me with talking about it.
Wait, stay and listen.
No.
Otherwise, no second apocalypse for you.
No.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
No, I have to go home.
Yeah, see you, Dan.
Talk to you guys next week.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Take care, man.
So Prott or Prott? Is it singular,
Yes.
plural?
Singular.
Singular, by Margaret St. Clair. Jared's name for today is Prott Herder. So, are you the character in our book? Because he did sort of herd Protts.
No, it's a new occupation that in the
Oh,
future.
because they all came back to Earth with them. I enjoyed the story. There were a lot of like really cute bits in there. Did the Protts remind anybody else of the cephalopods in Children of Ruin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
With
yeah.
like the
That's
inability to
interesting.
communicate and like trying to figure out how to send the message. And also just like some of the cuteness in how they were described, I think.
Yeah. I kind of thought of them as like big amoebas, but
Mm.
Yeah.
Also interesting.
You remember that Russia might remember in Berserk there was a little character looked like a giant nose.
Buck?
For some reason I thought of that. No, there was it was just like a one-page picture of this little guy looked like it was like a walking nose, and for some reason I thought of them.
Yeah.
Prots. Not sure
That's
why.
cute. I also thought I mean, when I visualized them, they look like sentient eggs because he kept talking. Like that's how he described them once, like as poached eggs or something. And so I couldn't get that image off my head. But the way they communicated, I think, felt very cephalopody.
I did wonder if it was. I did wonder if they were supposed to resemble sperm.
Hmm.
Oh.
Interesting. Maybe. But like, I mean, I guess once you start with the egg description, you can go anywhere.
Because I kind of wondered if there was an egg in the sperm, reproduction, and so.
he did mention Dr. Kinsey one time. Wasn't that the sex scientist or something like that?
Interesting. So, what was interesting about the story to me? Yeah, I guess mainly the characters and the language problems with the first contact stories that I always tend to enjoy, and I guess yeah, and I think I'm starting to like stories about characters with slow descent into madness and various ways that happens. I think this one had a particularly interesting way that our character went a little, not crazy exactly, but started to lose his mind a bit.
Obsession.
Yeah. With the obsession.
Savior complex.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was he was kind of losing his marbles, but it wasn't. You can't really blame him though. That's the thing. It's just he's had this constant ununderstandable telepathic barrage hitting his head all the time, and that's liable to drive anybody nuts, really.
Yeah. So it had a bit of a sad ending in that the thing that he was trying to prevent. Like he just wanted someone to know about his state of mind. And was he saying goodbye? Is that what he was trying to accomplish with that message he sent? But they followed that shuttle thing home. But I think the tragedy of it all is that now he's stuck there for nothing because the Protts went to Earth anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of it wasn't a happy ending. It was and you wonder, you only got this little tiny little glimpse of how society is with the Protts around Earth. And they I think they kind of just looked at it and were like, oh, that poor guy, but we got Protts to deal with here, and it was almost a society that was a little bit used to them at this point. So is it a horrible like a sad ending? Is it just how life is now. It's sad for him because he was trying to stop them from going to Earth, but they did, and it wasn't an apocalypse, obviously. I don't know. Are people happier now that they have Protts around? Who knows?
It sounds like some of them get a break sometimes, right? Like, because our guy had the time to read the whole story, and then there was an intrusion. But the one stuck in that spaceship gets a permanent barrage of input, I think. And also, I think if I remember correctly, the story started with him saying, "What else have I got to do now? Like, I have all the time in the world." So it's not like they're really struggling with this Prott problem to the point where they can't think of anything else. So yeah, I guess it is sad in that the people he supposedly tried to save, one, aren't saved, and two, it wasn't really as big a problem as he probably thought it was.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Or I don't know about that second bit, actually. Like, that's inconclusive.
Yeah, it's inconclusive. It's kind of up in the air. Yeah.
Steve, before we were recording, you said something about the ending. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the blanks that we have. Did I miss it, or are we supposed to know what those words were?
Oh, I was wondering what you guys thought. Like, I automatically filled something in when I saw the as blanking the blank, right? I was wondering what you guys thought they were actually saying there.
I mean, the character is telling us explicitly that it's not necessarily a bad word, or it's not necessarily like, I don't know, I think he tells us explicitly, like, he doesn't know yet how sex works with these creatures, so he's not sure if that's what it's referring to. But he does say, "I'm just saying blank because I don't know what it is supposed to be." So are you guys asking what we think it might be, or were you wondering whether it was explicitly
your first
stated?
impression? What was your first impression?
Interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the way that I read it, the way that he was like getting the impressions from these things was that they just like to talk a lot. They like to babble. And so I automatically filled it in as shooting the shit,
Oh.
And so I just kind of said that every time it came up, and it made the story funny to read.
Oh, that's funny. And for them to be so passionate about that, that just changes. Yeah, that's a fun exercise to fill in different things that it might be and see how it changes the tone of the story.
Yeah.
I like plucking out eyeballs. No. Oh man, yeah, I like that. That's funny. That would be an interesting meta story, though. Like, they like talking about how much they like to talk.
That's how I got it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, these aliens just like sitting around shooting the shit, and it's driving this guy nuts.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting that because he aspired to be Columbus, or more accurately, Dr. Kinsey of the Prott. And I was just like, Dr. Kinsey was the famous sexologist in the 1950s. So I was like, and I realized this was written in 1950s. And so she definitely had him on her mind, because he was a big deal back then. And so that's definitely a sign of the times that this was written, that because nobody knows who Dr. Kinsey is today unless you know some history or whatever, but nobody knows who it is today. And so it's very much a product of the times for that name to be in there like that. Columbus, of course, everybody knows, but it's I just found that very interesting. They put it in there because you mentioned sperm and and they look like eggs. So I was like, oh, okay. Dr. Kinsey. All right, yeah, all right. That was what he was studying, and
And didn't he say he wanted to study how the Protts reproduced, or like because they're non-protoplasmic life, and he wanted to understand how they multiply? So
yeah, he mentioned that. Yeah.
Cool. That's a good connection. Nice. Anything else about the story before we sign off for the evening?
No. Excited to get back into
Children of Memory.
Children of Time or Memory.
Yeah.
I don't know what the series name is. Is it Children of Time?
Children of Time is the series. Yeah. Yes, I'm excited to finish it. I think that although there is talk that there's more books coming in that kind of it, but to kind of see like what do you do next? I really have no idea where it goes next. When we got to the end of like the Southern Reach, one of the really fun parts of Southern Reach was like, right, if you were going to write this story yourself, where would you take it? And plenty of ideas for that. This one, it felt like the first one was a closed book. The second one feels even more like a closed book. So where do you go for the third? The third one is sort of enticing in that way.
Yeah, I think it feels like multiple standalones in the same world. I don't think it's a continuous story, right? So, and it has a huge cast of characters from the first 2 pages if you look at it. So maybe we're going to be doing some universe hopping through wormholes that the cephalopods invented in the last book.
Yeah. Well, Bosh, you can just read us the last page right now if you want.
I would, but I don't have my copy with me.
So, on such fine lines are decisions made.
I do have it on Kindle, so you have to know I'm really being nice right now. I could open it up in my browser tab and read you the last line if you really wanted. Anyway, I know nobody wants to do that except me. So we will see everybody in a week with the first 3 sections of Children of Memory and the short story for next week, which I'm forgetting the name of, but the next one in the big book of science fiction. Does Chris know?
William 10.
William
the
10.
Liberation of Earth.
Liberation of Earth by William 10. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon. Bye.